In 1976, a school bus vanished with 26 children and their teacher. 3 days later, it was found parked at the school, empty. Decades later, a hidden room beneath the gym revealed what really happened. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this heartbreaking story of innocence stolen and a mystery that haunted a small town for nearly half a century, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Now, let's travel back to May 1976 to a small town in Nebraska where an ordinary field trip became an unspeakable tragedy. May 14th, 1976, Hartwell Elementary School, rural Nebraska. It was the last field trip of the school year. Mrs. Rebecca Winters, 34, had organized a visit to the Nebraska State Museum in Lincoln, a 2-hour drive from the small farming town of Hartwell, population 1,200. Her class was a combined group of 4th and 5th graders, 26 children total, ages 9 to 11. 4th graders, Tommy Brewer, 9, class clown who made everyone laugh. Sarah Chen, 9, loved reading, always carried a book. Miguel Santos, 10, talented artist. Drew pictures for classmates. Katie Sullivan, 9, shy but kind. Befriended everyone. David Park, 10, curious about everything, asked endless questions. Jessica Moore, 9, wanted to be a teacher like Mrs. Winters. 7, other 4th graders, all excited for their museum adventure. 5th graders, Emma Caldwell, 11, student council representative, natural leader Lucas Grant, 11, science enthusiast, collected rocks and fossils, Rachel Foster, 10, played violin, performed at school concerts, James Bishop, 11, athlete, kind-hearted, protective of younger kids, Lily Rodriguez, 11, wrote poetry, won school writing contest, Marcus Webb, 10, fascinated by history, loved Civil War stories. 7 other 5th graders, their last elementary field trip. At 8:15 a.m., the yellow school bus, number 7, pulled up in front of Hartwell Elementary. The driver, Carl Jennings, 52, was a familiar face. He'd been driving school routes for 15 years, known for his patience and safety record. Parents waved goodbye from the parking lot. The bus departed at 8:30 a.m., heading east on Highway 34 toward Lincoln. The drive was uneventful. At 10:45 a.m., they arrived at the museum. Carl parked in the visitor lot. Mrs. Winters led the children inside, clipboards and permission slips in hand. They spent 3 hours exploring exhibits, dinosaur fossils, Native American artifacts, pioneer history. The children were well-behaved, engaged, asking questions. Museum staff later remembered Mrs. Winters as organized and attentive. At 2 p.m., they returned to the bus. Carl started the engine. Mrs. Winters counted heads, all 26 children accounted for. They began the drive home. At 2:15 p.m., a gas station attendant in Greenwood, Nebraska, 40 miles from Lincoln, saw the yellow bus stop for fuel. Carl paid cash, used the restroom. The children were visible through the windows, talking, laughing. Nothing seemed wrong. That was the last confirmed sighting of school bus number 7 with anyone inside. At 4:45 p.m., 30 minutes after the scheduled return time, parents gathered anxiously at Hartwell Elementary. The bus hadn't arrived. At 5:30 p.m., the principal called the Nebraska State Patrol. At 6:47 p.m., school bus number 7 was found, parked in the school parking lot, engine off, keys on the dashboard, completely empty. The scene made no sense. Officers arrived to find the bus sitting exactly where it should have been, as if Carl had parked it normally after the trip. But there were no people. The initial inspection revealed disturbing details. All the children's belongings were still on the bus: backpacks, lunchboxes, jackets. Mrs. Winters' purse was under the driver's seat, wallet and keys untouched. Carl's clipboard with the rote sheet was on the dashboard. No signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the bus. The fuel gauge showed half a tank, consistent with the Greenwood fill-up. But the most chilling detail, the bus doors were closed from the outside, requiring someone to shut them after everyone had exited. The hydraulic door mechanism showed no malfunction. 26 children and 2 adults had simply vanished between Greenwood and Hartwell, a 40-mile stretch of rural highway. The investigation began immediately. Nebraska State Patrol, FBI, and hundreds of volunteers launched a massive search. The route between Greenwood and Hartwell was combed foot by foot. Fields, barns, abandoned buildings, nothing. Interviews with every resident along Highway 34 yielded no witnesses. No one had seen the bus stop. No one had seen anything unusual. One farmer, Harold Pruitt, mentioned something strange. Around 3:30 p.m., he had heard what sounded like children singing, faint, distant, coming from the direction of the old school building on his property. But the building had been abandoned for decades, and when he walked over to check, he found nothing. Bloodhounds tracked scents from the bus but lost the trail in the school parking lot, as if the 27 people had simply evaporated. Theories emerged: mass abduction, a coordinated kidnapping, human trafficking, a cult. But there was no evidence supporting anything. No ransom demands, no sightings, no bodies. The case devastated Hartwell. The town of 1,200 had lost 26 children and a beloved teacher in a single incomprehensible event. Parents held vigils. Investigators worked around the clock. But as weeks became months, hope faded. By the end of 1976, the case went cold. School bus number 7 was stored in an evidence lot. Hartwell Elementary continued operating, but the building felt haunted. Parents were terrified. Enrollment dropped. In 1985, the school closed permanently due to declining population. The building sat empty, slowly deteriorating. For 47 years, the disappearance remained unsolved, America's most baffling mass abduction of children. Spring 2023. The old Hartwell Elementary building had been abandoned for 38 years. Now condemned and structurally unsafe, the county finally allocated funds for demolition to make way for a community center. Demolition began in April. Workers started with the exterior, then moved inside. The building was a time capsule. 1970s classroom furniture, faded posters on walls, desks covered in dust. On May 9, 2023, almost 47 years to the day after the disappearance, the demolition crew reached the gymnasium. They were preparing to tear up the wooden floor when a crew member noticed something unusual. A section of the floor sounded hollow. Beneath decades of dust and scuff marks, there were faint seam lines, a trap door expertly concealed. The foreman called the county inspector. When they pried up the floor panels, they found a metal hatch with a rusted wheel lock, like something from a ship or a bank vault. It took 3 men and a hydraulic jack to turn the wheel. The hatch opened with a groan, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A smell of stale air and decay wafted up. They called the police immediately. Within hours, the site was swarmed with investigators. FBI agents arrived from Omaha. Local sheriffs secured the perimeter. The media descended. On May 10, 2023, a forensic team descended the ladder. What they found 20 feet underground would rewrite everything. The underground room was approximately 40 feet by 30 feet, the size of a small classroom. Concrete walls, a single ventilation shaft long since sealed shut, emergency lights, long dead, and in the center of the room, 27 wooden desks arranged in perfect rows. Each desk had a name carved into the surface. Investigators recognized them immediately from the 1976 case files. Front row, Tommy Brewer, Sarah Chen, Miguel Santos, Katie Sullivan, David Park. Second row, Emma Caldwell, Lucas Grant, Rachel Foster, James Bishop, Lily Rodriguez. The names continued, all 26 children. And at the front of the room, a larger teacher's desk with Mrs. Rebecca Winters carved into the wood. At each desk sat human remains, small skeletons of children collapsed where they'd once sat, still wearing the clothes they'd disappeared in 47 years ago. Faded t-shirts, jeans, sneakers frozen in time. Mrs. Winters's remains were at her desk, slumped forward, one skeletal hand outstretched as if reaching for something. The forensic team worked carefully, documenting everything. The scene told a story of unimaginable horror. The walls were covered in messages scratched into concrete with metal fragments from broken desk legs. Help us. We can't breathe. Someone please find us. Tally marks covered one wall. Someone had been counting days. The mark stopped at 37. Medical analysis would later confirm the 27 had died of asphyxiation. The sealed ventilation shaft, combined with 27 people breathing in an enclosed space, had depleted the oxygen within days. But the most significant discovery was on Mrs. Winters's desk, a tape recorder covered in dust but remarkably preserved. Inside was a cassette tape, still intact. On May 12, 2023, FBI audio technicians played the tape in a secure facility. Investigators, now elderly parents of the missing children, and town officials gathered to listen. The tape began with a click. Then Mrs. Winters's voice, calm at first but strained. "This is Rebecca Winters. It's May 14th, 1976. If anyone finds this, we need help. We're trapped under the school. I don't know how we got here." A pause. Children's voices in the background, scared, crying. "We were on the bus driving home. Carl pulled into the school parking lot. Then, I don't remember. I woke up here in this room. All the children are here. Carl is here. We're all here." Another pause. Her breathing quickens. "The door is sealed from the outside. We've tried everything. Pounding, shouting. No one can hear us. The air. It's getting thin. We need help. Please, if someone finds this, tell the parents. Tell them we didn't suffer long. Tell them we tried." The tape continued for several minutes. Mrs. Winters described what had happened. They'd arrived at the school, parked, and then nothing. Memory blank. They'd awakened in this underground room, all 27 of them. Then came the most chilling revelation. "I found something, a letter left on my desk. It says this was supposed to be an experiment, a test of emergency shelter protocols for civil defense, but something went wrong. The letter is signed by Static. Then, Principal Howard Marsh. He did this. He brought us here. But I don't think he meant for the door to seal. The letter says Phase 1, 24-hour containment drill. But the door won't open. And he's not coming back." The tape ended with Mrs. Winters's final words. "To the parents, your children were brave. They held hands. They sang songs to stay calm. They're sleeping now. Please, you'd forgive me. I couldn't save them." Silence. Then the tape stopped. The letter Mrs. Winters mentioned was found, brittle and yellowed, in a drawer of her desk. It was typed on Hartwell Elementary letterhead, dated May 14th, 1976. "Project Safeguard, Phase 1, Exercise 24-hour emergency shelter containment. Drill participants will be secured in sub-level facility to test civil defense readiness. Exercise concludes May 15th, 0800 hours. All safety protocols in place. Not Principal Howard Marsh." But there was no Phase 2, no safety protocols, no emergency release. Howard Marsh had died in 1978, a car accident on a rural highway, alone, 2 years after the disappearance. He'd never mentioned the underground room. The investigation at the time had cleared him of suspicion. Now, 47 years later, the truth emerged. Marsh had been obsessed with Cold War civil defense. In 1974, he'd used school maintenance funds to construct a fallout shelter beneath the gymnasium, without board approval, without permits, in secret. He'd rationalized it as preparedness. In 1976, he'd decided to conduct a drill to prove the shelter worked. He'd drugged the bus driver's coffee at a prearranged stop. Carl had briefly left the bus at the Greenwood gas station. The sedative wouldn't take effect for 30 minutes. By the time Carl returned to Hartwell and parked, the drug had kicked in. He'd collapsed. Marsh, with help from an accomplice, never identified, had moved all 27 unconscious people through a service entrance into the underground shelter. The plan was 24 hours. Prove the shelter could sustain life. Show the school board he'd been right all along, but the ventilation system Marsh had installed was faulty. The emergency release mechanism jammed. And when Marsh realized what he'd done, sealed 27 people in a tomb, he'd panicked. He never came back. He'd let them die rather than face the consequences. 2 years later, consumed by guilt, he'd driven his car off a bridge. The discovery devastated Hartwell all over again. Families who'd spent 47 years wondering finally had answers. But those answers brought no comfort. Sarah Chen's mother, now 84, said through tears, "I spent my whole life thinking she was alive somewhere, that maybe she'd been taken to a good home. This is worse than anything I imagined." Tommy Brewer's father, now 79, said, "He was 9 years old. He died scared in the dark 20 feet from where I stood searching for him." The FBI confirmed there was no accomplice left to prosecute. Howard Marsh was dead. The case was closed. But questions remained. Had anyone else known? Had the school board suspected? Who had sealed the gymnasium floor so perfectly that no one noticed for 47 years? The investigation revealed that Marsh had hired a construction crew from out of state in 1974, paying cash, no records. After the disappearance, he'd personally overseen gymnasium renovations during summer 1976, sealing the trapdoor beneath new flooring. The town of Hartwell, now barely 400 residents, voted to convert the site into a memorial rather than a community center. On May 14, 2024, 48 years to the day, the memorial was unveiled. The underground classroom was preserved as a historic site, accessible by guided tour only. The desks remained, each one bearing a name, a small photo, and a candle. Above ground, a monument lists all 27 names. In memory of the Hartwell, 27th of May, 1976, 26 children, 1 teacher, 1 driver stolen by pride, silenced by fear. Your light was extinguished too soon, but your memory will never fade. Mrs. Winters's tape was played publicly at the ceremony. There wasn't a dry eye. Parents, now elderly, held each other. Grandchildren of the victims stood in silence. Emma Caldwell's younger sister, now 58, said, "She was supposed to come home that day. We had a birthday cake waiting. For 47 years, that cake sat in my memory. Now, finally, we can let it go." The case sparked nationwide reform in school safety, administrative oversight, and construction regulations. It also became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and the devastating consequences of one man's arrogance. 3 months after the memorial opened, something strange happened. A security guard working the night shift heard children's voices coming from the preserved classroom, singing. He described it as faint, like an echo, a song he didn't recognize. The recording system captured it. 27 voices harmonizing. The audio was analyzed. No explanation, no source. Since then, multiple visitors and staff have reported the same phenomenon. Always at dusk, always the same melody. Music historians identified it. "This Little Light of Mine," a gospel hymn often taught to children in the 1970s. Some say it's residual energy. Others say it's imagination. But those who've heard it describe the same feeling. Not fear, but peace. As if the children are no longer trapped, no longer scared. As if, after 47 years in darkness, their lights are finally shining. The Hartwell 27 remind us that the greatest monsters don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they wear the mask of authority, convinced their vision justifies any cost, even the lives of innocent children. And sometimes the truth waits in the dark for decades, patient and terrible, until someone finally opens the door. And